Hello there. Hello, Evelyn and Sharon and Kelly and Don't Have a Tiff and I don't know, several other names that I recognized flashed up when I made the live go live. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm so glad that this little band of firesiders get together every day at 5 Pacific in your wherever you are and my wife and my living room. And sit in front of the fire and read together, because that's what Fireside Reading is. My name's Gildart. I'm an actor. I am an audiobook reader. And I'm now a fireside reader. And we together are all firesiders. Tomorrow, we release another Fireside Reading with Dreamscape, which is the company that I have partnered with to release the DVDs and video on demands of the several readings. And it's Sherlock Holmes tomorrow, The Study in Scarlet, which is a really good book that gets released tomorrow. So Fireside Reading has grown in leaps and bounds since we started. If you were able to get onto Amazon at any time and find Fireside Reading and give a review. I don't know if you whether you've seen it or not, whether you were able to give 5 stars. I gather 5 stars is the magic bullet. It's just good. It's good. I suppose when I go to buy stuff, it's always nice to see that there are lots of people who like the product. So if you would be able to do that, I would greatly appreciate it. At some time. Alternatively, we sit here in front of the fire every day together and read a little bit of a book. And we are currently reading The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. It got a little bit exciting yesterday. I think we're going to there's going to be some sort of a bad thing that's just about to happen. We will find out more, I dare say, as we read. Count Fosco is talking, and they are all together in the little boathouse where Miss Holcomb, on the first day that she was at Blackwater Park, found the dead and dying dog. So, Count Fosco was expostulating when last we saw him, and I'll bring it in a little bit before we cut off last time. Welcome to a fireside reading of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Reading 30. That there are foolish criminals who are discovered and wise criminals who escape. The hiding of a crime or the detection of a crime, what is it? A trial of skill between the police on the one side and the individual on the other. When the criminal is a brutal, ignorant fool, the police win in 9 cases out of 10. When the criminal is a resolute, educated, highly intelligent man, the police in 9 cases out of 10 lose. If the police win, you generally hear all about it. If the police lose, you generally hear nothing. And on this tottering foundation, you build up your comfortable moral maxim that crime causes its own detection. Yes, all the crime you know of, and what of the rest? Devilish true and very well put, cried a voice at the entrance of the boathouse. Sir Percival had recovered his equanimity and had come back while we were listening to the Count. Some of it may be true, I said, and all of it may be very well put, but I don't see why Count Fosco should celebrate the victory of the criminal over society with so much exultation, or why you, Sir Percival, should applaud him so loudly for doing it. Do you hear that, Fosco? Asked Sir Percival. Take my advice and Make your peace with your audience. Tell them virtue's a fine thing. They like that, I can promise you." The Count laughed inwardly and silently, and 2 of the white mice in his waistcoat, alarmed by the internal convulsion going on beneath them, darted out in a violent hurry and scrambled into their cage again.
"The ladies, my good Percival, shall tell me about virtue," he said. "They are better authorities than I am, for they know what virtue is, and I don't."
"You hear him?" said Sir Percival. "Isn't he awful?"
"It is true," said the Count quietly. "I am a citizen of the world, and I have met in my time with so many different sorts of virtue that I am puzzled in my old age to say which is the right sort and which is the wrong. Here in England there is one virtue. There is in China another virtue. And John Englishman says my virtue is the genuine virtue, and John Chinaman says my virtue is the genuine virtue. And I say yes to one and no to the other, and am just as much bewildered about it in the case of John the top boots as I am in the case of John with the pigtail. Ah, nice little mousie, come kiss me. What is your own private notion of a virtuous man, my pretty? A man who keeps you warm and gives you plenty to eat, and a good notion, too, for it is intelligible at the least.
"Stay a minute, Count," I interposed. "Accepting your illustration, surely we have one unquestionable virtue in England which is wanting in China. The Chinese authorities kill thousands of innocent people on the most frivolous pretexts. We in England are free from all guilt of that kind. We commit no such dreadful crime. We abhor reckless bloodshed with all our hearts." "Quite right, Marion," said Laura. "Well thought of and well expressed." "Pray allow the Count to proceed," said Madame Fosco with stern civility. "You will find, young ladies, that he never speaks without having excellent reasons for all that he says."
"Thank you, my angel," replied the Count. "Have a bonbon."
He took out of his pocket a pretty little inlaid box and placed it open on the table. "Chocolat à la vanille," cried the impenetrable man, cheerfully rattling the sweetmeats in the box and bowing all round. "Offered by Fosco, as an act of homage to the charming society." "Be good enough to go on, Count," said his wife with a spiteful reference to myself. "Oblige me by answering Miss Holcombe."
"Miss Holcombe is unanswerable," replied the polite Italian. "That is to say, so far as she goes. Yes, I agree with her. John Bull does abhor the crimes of John Chinaman. He is the quickest old gentleman at finding out faults that are his neighbors, and the slowest old gentleman at finding out the faults that are his own, who exists on the face of creation. Is he so very much better in this way than the people whom he condemns in their way? English society, Miss Holcombe, is as often the accomplice as it is the enemy of crime. Yes, crime is in this country what crime is in other countries, a good friend to a man and to those about him as often as it is an enemy. A great rascal provides for his wife and family. The worse he is, the more he makes them the objects for your sympathy. He often provides also for himself. A profligate spendthrift who is always borrowing money will get more from his friends than the rigidly honest man who only borrows of them once under pressure of the direst want. In the one case, the friends will not be at all surprised, and they will give. In the other case, they will be very much surprised, and they will hesitate. Is the prison that Mr. Scoundrel lives in at the end of his career a more uncomfortable place than the workhouse that Mr. Honesty lives in at the end of his career? When John Howard, philanthropist, wants to relieve misery, he goes to find it in prisons, where crime is wretched, not in huts and hovels, where virtue is wretched too. Who is the English poet who has won the most universal sympathy, who makes the easiest of all subjects for pathetic writing and pathetic painting? That nice young person who began life with a forgery and ended it by a suicide. Your dear, romantic, interesting Chatterton. Which gets on best, do you think, of two poor starving dressmakers? The woman who resists temptation and is honest, or the woman who falls under temptation and steals? You all know that the stealing is the making of that second woman's fortune. It advertises her from length to breadth of good-humored charitable England, and she is relieved as the breaker of a commandment, when she would have been left to starve as the keeper of it. Oh, come here, my jolly little mouse. Hey, presto, pass! I transform you, for the time being, into a respectable lady. Stop there in the palm of my great big hand, my dear, and listen. You marry the poor man who you love, mouse, and one half of your friends pity, and the other half blame you. And now, on the contrary, you sell yourself for gold to a man you don't care for, and all your friends rejoice over you, and a minister of public worship sanctions the base horror of the vilest of all human bargains, and smiles and smirks afterwards at your table if you are polite enough to ask him to breakfast. Hey, presto, puss! Be a mouse again and squeak. If you continue to be a lady much longer, I shall have you telling me that society abhors crime, and then, mouse, I shall doubt if your own eyes and ears are really of any use to you. Ha! I am a bad man, Lady Glyde, am I not? I say what other people only think, and when all the rest of the world is in a conspiracy to accept the mask for the true face, mine is the harsh hand that tears off the plump pasteboard and shows the bare bones beneath. I will get up on my big elephant's legs before I do myself any more harm in your amiable estimations. I will get up and take a little airy walk of my own. Dear ladies, as your excellent Sheridan said, I go and leave my character behind me. He got up, put the cage on the table, and paused for a moment to count the mice in it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh? He cried, with a look of horror. Where in the name of heaven is the fifth, the youngest, the whitest, the most amiable of all my Benjamin of mice? Neither Laura nor I were in any favourable disposition to be amused. The Count's glib cynicism had revealed a new aspect of his nature from which we both recoiled. But it was impossible to resist the comical distress of so very large a man at the loss of so very small a mouse. We laughed in spite of ourselves, and when Madame Fosco rose to set the example of leaving the boathouse empty so that her husband might search to its remotest corners, we rose also to follow her out. Before we had taken 3 quick steps, the Count's quick eye discovered the lost mouse under the seat that we had been occupying. He pulled aside the bench, took the little animal up in his hand, and then suddenly stopped on his knees, looking intently at a particular place on the ground just beneath him. When he rose to his feet again, his hand shook so that he could hardly put the mouse back in the cage, and his face was of a faint, livid yellow hue all over.
"Percival," he said in a whisper, "Percival, come here."
Sir Percival had paid no attention to any of us for the last 10 minutes. He had been entirely absorbed in writing figures on the sand and then rubbing them out again with the point of his stick. "What's the matter now?" he asked, lounging carelessly into the boathouse.
"Do you see nothing there?"
said the Count, catching him nervously by the collar with one hand and pointing with the other to the place near which he had found the mouse. "I see plenty of dry sand," answered Sir Percival, "and a spot of dirt in the middle of it."
"Not dirt,"
whispered the Count, fastening the other hand suddenly on Sir Percival's collar and shaking it in agitation.
"Blood."
Laura was near enough to hear the last word, softly, as he whispered it. She turned to me with a look of horror. "Nonsense, my dear," I said. "There is no need to be alarmed. It is only the blood of a poor little stray dog." Everybody was astonished, and everybody's eyes were fixed on me inquiringly. "How do you know that?" asked Sir Percival, speaking first. "I found the dog here, dying, on the day when you all returned from abroad," I replied. "The poor creature had strayed into the plantation and had been shot by your keeper." "Whose dog was it?" inquired Sir Percival. "Not one of mine." "Did you try to save the poor thing?" asked Laura earnestly. "Surely you tried to save it, Marion." "Yes," I said. "The housekeeper and I both did our best. But the dog was mortally wounded, and he died under our hands." "Whose dog was it?" persisted Sir Percival, repeating his question a little irritably. "One of mine?" "No, not one of yours." "Whose then? Did the housekeeper know?" The housekeeper's report of Mrs. Catherick's desire to conceal her visit to Blackwater Park from Sir Percival's knowledge recurred to my memory the moment he put that last question, and I half doubted the discretion of answering it, but in my anxiety to quiet the general alarm, I had thoughtlessly advanced too far to draw back, except at the risk of exciting suspicion, which might only make matters worse. There was nothing for it but to answer at once, without reference to results. "Yes," I said, "the housekeeper knew. She told me it was Mrs. Catherick's dog." Sir Percival had hitherto remained at the inner end of the boathouse with Count Fosco, while I spoke to him from the door. But the instant Mrs. Catherick's name passed my lips, he pushed by the Count roughly and placed himself face to face with me under the open daylight. "How came the housekeeper to know it was Mrs. Catherick's dog?" he asked, fixing his eyes on mine with a frowning interest and attention which half angered, half startled me. "She knew it," I said quietly, "because Mrs. Catherick brought the dog with her." "Brought it with her? Where did she bring it with her?" "To this house." "What the devil did Mrs. Catherick want at this house?" The manner in which he put the question was even more offensive than the language in which he expressed it. I marked my sense of his want of common politeness by silently turning away from him. Just as I moved, the Count's persuasive hand was laid on his shoulder, and the Count's mellifluous voice interposed to quiet him. My dear Percival, gently, gently. Sir Percival looked round in his angriest manner. The Count only smiled and repeated the soothing application, "Gently, my good friend, gently." Sir Percival hesitated, followed me a few steps, and to my great surprise, offered me an apology. "I beg your pardon, Miss Holcombe," he said. "I have been out of order lately, and I'm afraid I am a little irritable. But I should like to know what Mrs. Catherick could possibly want here. When did she come? Was the housekeeper the only person who saw her?" "The only person," I answered, "so far as I know." The Count interposed again. "In that case, why not question the housekeeper?" he said. "Why not go, Percival, to the fountainhead of information at once?" "Quite right," said Sir Percival. "Of course, the housekeeper is the first person to question. Excessively stupid of me not to see it myself." With these words, he instantly left us to return to the house. The motive of the Count's interference, which had puzzled me at first, betrayed itself when Sir Percival's back was turned. He had a host of questions to put to me about Mrs. Catherick and the cause of her visit to Blackwater Park, which he could scarcely have asked in his friend's presence. I made my answers as short as I civilly could, for I had already determined to check the least approach to any exchanging of confidences between Count Fosco and myself. Laura, however, unconsciously helped him to extract all my information by making inquiries herself, which left me no alternative but to reply to her, or to appear in the very unenviable and very false character of a depository of Sir Percival's secrets. The end of it was that in about 10 minutes' time the Count knew as much as I know of Mrs. Catherick, and of the events which have so strangely connected us with her daughter Anne, from the time when Hartwright met with her to this day. The effect of my information on him was, in one respect, curious enough. Intimately as he knows Sir Percival, and closely as he appears to be associated with Sir Percival's private affairs in general, he is certainly as far as I am from knowing anything of the true story of Anne Catherick. The unsolved mystery in connection with this unhappy woman is now rendered doubly suspicious, in my eyes, by the absolute conviction which I feel that the clue to it has been hidden by Sir Percival from the most intimate friend he has in the world. It was impossible to mistake the eager curiosity of the Count's look and manner while he drank in greedily every word that fell from my lips. There are many kinds of curiosity, I know, but there is no misinterpreting the curiosity of blank surprise. If I ever saw it in my life, I saw it in the Count's face. While the questions and answers were going on, we had all been strolling quietly back through the plantation. As soon as we reached the house, the first object that we saw in front of us was Sir Percival's dog-cart, with the horse put to, and the groom waiting by it in his stable jacket. In these unexpected appearances, if these unexpected appearances were to be trusted, the examination of the housekeeper had produced important results already. "A fine horse, my friend," said the Count, addressing the groom with the most engaging familiarity of manner. "You are going to drive out?" "I am not going, sir," replied the man, looking at his stable jacket and evidently wondering whether the foreign gentleman took it for his livery. "My master drives himself." "Aha!" said the Count. "Does he indeed? I wonder he gives himself the trouble when he has got you to drive for him. Is he going to fatigue that nice, shining, pretty horse by taking him very far today?" "I don't know, sir.
answered the man. The horse is a mare, if you please, sir. She's the highest couraged thing we've got in the stables. Her name's Brown Molly, sir, and she'll go till she drops. Sir Percival usually takes Isaac of York for the short distances.
And your shining, courageous Brown Molly for the long?
Logical inference, Miss Holcombe.
Logical inference, Miss Holcombe, continued the Count, wheeling round briskly and addressing me.
Sir Percival is going a long distance today.
I made no reply. I had my own inferences to draw for what I knew through the housekeeper and from what I saw before me, and I did not choose to share them with Count Fosco. When Sir Percival was in Cumberland, I thought to myself, he walked away a long distance on Anne's account to question the family at Todd's Corner. Now he is in Hampshire. Is he going to drive away a long distance on Anne's account again to question Mrs. Catherick at Welmingham? We all entered the house. As we crossed the hall, Sir Percival came out from the library to meet us. He looked hurried and pale and anxious, but for all that he was in his most polite mood when he spoke to us.
I am sorry to say I am obliged to leave you, he began. A long drive, a matter that I can't very well put off. I shall be back in good time tomorrow, but before I go, I should like that little business formality which I spoke of this morning to be settled. Laura, will you come into the library? It won't take a minute. A mere formality. Countess, may I trouble you also? I want you and the Countess Fosco to be witnessing to a signature, nothing more. Come in at once and get it over.
He held the library door open until they had passed in, followed them, and shut it softly. I remained for a moment afterwards, standing alone in the hall, with my heart beating fast and my mind misgiving me sadly. Then I went on to the staircase and ascended slowly to my own room. Thank you all so much for joining me. We will not be reading tomorrow or the next day. This trial is going on and hopefully will be concluded. Well, it'll be definitely concluded by Wednesday. Then I read Thursday, but then I'm afraid I'm going away. Well, I'm not afraid. I'm actually looking forward to going. Laura's shooting a movie, and I'm going to go and see her for the weekend. So I will read on Thursday, and then I will read the next Tuesday. Sorry for that, but I we'll get back to this with some daily rigor after that, and until then, we'll just have to make do with a reading on Thursday. Thank you all so much for joining me, but until I see you on Thursday, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.